My daughter took my Social Security check and took off for the beach, leaving me with no food. She came back sun-kissed and happy, thinking I'd be begging for help. But when she opened the refrigerator to get some dinner, she screamed in horror at what she saw inside. Greetings, dear listeners. Before I begin my story, a story of betrayal and how I one day chose myself, I ask you to support this channel. Please subscribe and hit the like button. It helps stories like this be heard. And write in the comments what city or country you are listening from. It always warms my spirit to see how many of us there are. And now, enjoy the story. The front door had slammed shut 3 hours ago, but the heavy, sugary scent of Quintessa's perfume still hung in the hallway. That fragrance always seemed too intrusive to me, too loud for our old brownstone with its high ceilings, where the air was used to smelling like the dust of ages and dried lavender. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, staring at the closed door of the pantry. The silence in the house was absolute, ringing. I used to love this silence. It meant peace after a long day at the sewing machine, when my eyes were tired from tiny stitches and my back ached from the endless stooping. But today, the silence felt predatory. It was waiting. My stomach twisted into a tight knot. It's shameful to admit, but I was hungry, just ordinary human hunger, the kind that gets persistent by evening. I walked over to the cabinet. The hinges creaked as if complaining about the disturbance. The shelves were impeccably clean and terrifyingly empty. Quintessa had packed in a rush. She had darted around the apartment like a bright tropical bird trapped in a cage, tossing bikinis, light sundresses, and tanning lotions into her suitcase. I remembered how she stopped in the doorway, already wearing her shoes, and held out her hand. "Mama, give me your card just in case. What if the ATM down there doesn't work or something?" "But, Quintessa," I tried to object, feeling a chill run down my spine. "That's my whole Social Security check. What am I supposed to live on for 2 weeks?" "Oh, don't start." She rolled her eyes, snatching the plastic card from my fingers. "You've got a full jar of grits. Boil them up, add a little butter, and it's beautiful. It'll be good for you to detox. Doctors advise a diet for everyone at your age. Don't invent problems where there aren't any. I deserve this vacation." And she left. She flew off to Miami, to the sun, to cocktails with little umbrellas, taking my money, my peace of mind, and, as it turned out, my food with her. Grits. Right, she mentioned grits. I reached for the top shelf where the old glass jar stood, labeled grits in my own handwriting some 20 years ago. The jar felt suspiciously light. I took off the lid and looked inside. At the bottom, amidst some grayish dust, lay a few lonely grains. There wasn't enough to feed a sparrow, let alone a grown woman. She had lied, or maybe she just didn't care. She hadn't even bothered to check if there was food before condemning me to this starvation diet. She just threw words out to silence my anxiety and forgot about me the second she called her Uber. My chest went cold. It wasn't the kind of cold you get from a draft. It was ice that starts growing from the inside when you realize that the person you carried, nursed, and raised isn't just selfish. They are cruel. I closed the jar and put it back. The sound of glass against wood rang out like a gunshot. I had to do something. Maybe some loose change? Quintessa often scattered coins, shaking them out of her jeans pockets. I headed to her room. Chaos reigned here. Clothes were strewn on chairs, open tubes of lipstick on the vanity, crumpled receipts on the floor. I started methodically searching the surfaces. Under a stack of glossy magazines, nothing. In the jewelry dish, empty. My gaze fell on a crumpled piece of paper, carelessly thrown at the trash bin, but missing the mark. I bent down and picked it up. It was a printout of the hotel reservation and flight itinerary. I smoothed the sheet out on the tabletop. The letters danced before my eyes, but I saw the total figure immediately. It was bold, black, and merciless. The amount my daughter had spent on 2 weeks of beach relaxation was exactly equal to 3 months of my benefits. 3. I stood in the semi-darkness of her room, and it felt like the walls were closing in. For years, I had darned my old stockings. I had turned coats inside out to remake them, coats I'd been wearing since before the turn of the century. I denied myself an extra peach to buy her the best shoes for school, then for college, then just because, "Mama, this is what's in style now." I walked out of her room, pulling the door firmly shut behind me, as if cutting myself off from that smell of carelessness and betrayal. The living room met me with silent grandeur. I walked in. Here, in the light of the street lamps filtering through the heavy velvet curtains, stood them, my treasures, my jailers, the antique oak buffet, carved and heavy as a tombstone. Inside, behind the glass, the crystal and fine Haviland Limoges porcelain gleamed dully. A service for 12, which we had eaten from maybe twice in our lives. "This is for Quintessa's wedding," I used to tell myself. The wedding never happened, but the china waited. On the dresser stood a silver tea service that had come down to me from my grandmother. Next to it, a jewelry box with pieces I never wore because where would an old woman like me go in this? Let it stay for the grandchildren. In the hall closet hung fur coats smelling of mothballs, which Quintessa contemptuously called dust collectors, but which were worth a fortune. I looked around my living room. This wasn't a home, it was a museum. The Quintessa Johnson Museum. And I wasn't the mistress of the house. I was the unpaid curator. A curator who shuffles around in worn-out slippers, wipes dust off the exhibits, and starves to death so that one day a visitor can come and take everything without even saying thank you. My stomach growled treacherously again, but now something else was mixed with the sound. Anger? No, anger is a hot feeling. This was clarity, icy, crystal clear clarity. I walked over to the coffee table where a stack of old newspapers lay. Quintessa always scolded me for not throwing them out. "Junk! Trash!" she would snort. But I knew that in the classified section there was something I needed. I had seen the ad a week ago, circled it in pencil, just because, out of habit, never admitting the thought that I might need it. I sorted through the papers. There it was, the City Chronicle, the page with private ads. The red pencil circle was barely visible in the dim light, but I knew what it said. Mr. Alistair Sterling. I buy antiques, porcelain, silver, rarities, honest appraisal, house calls. I looked at the telephone. Old, rotary, reliable. "Grits, you say?" I whispered into the void. I picked up the receiver. The dial tone was long and steady. I started turning the dial, entering the number, digit after digit. Every turn of the dial took effort, as if I were cracking a safe where my own life had been locked away. It started ringing. 1, 2, 3. "Hello?" a male voice answered, slightly raspy, but polite. "Listening." I took a deep breath of air that smelled like the dust of my museum. "Good evening." My voice sounded unexpectedly firm, even to myself. "Is this Mr. Sterling? My name is Eulalie. Do you buy sterling silver flatware?" "I do." Professional interest appeared in his voice. "What period are we talking about?" I looked at the empty velvet case where the spoon should have been, then shifted my gaze to the buffet. "Yes, early 20th century," I said. "I want to sell it. Tomorrow." Mr. Sterling turned out to be punctual. At exactly 9 in the morning, the doorbell sliced through the silence of the brownstone, making me flinch. I hadn't slept all night, sitting in the armchair opposite the buffet like a sentry guarding treasures before surrendering them to the enemy. But the enemy was no longer poverty. The enemy was my own submissiveness. I opened the door. On the threshold stood a man of about 60 in a neat gray overcoat and wire-rimmed glasses. He looked intellectual, black, distinguished, but his eyes, keen, observant, betrayed a man used to appraising not just things, but people. "Mrs. Eulalie?" he asked, tilting his head slightly. "I am Alistair. We spoke yesterday." "Come in. Don't take off your shoes." I stepped back, letting him inside. He walked into the living room, and I saw his gaze slide over the walls, the heavy furniture, the paintings. He had expected to see another grandmother with cheap trinkets, silver-plated knickknacks, and a hope to get at least a penny. But when he saw the furnishings, his eyebrows rose ever so slightly. "You have an interesting home," he noted cautiously. "This isn't a home," I replied dryly. "It's a storage facility." I walked to the sideboard and took out the heavy case lined with worn velvet. The latch clicked. I threw back the lid. On the dark green lining lay 12 silver spoons. They were massive, with intricate engraving on the handles. The monograms of my great-grandparents intertwined with grapevines. Quintessa adored them. She often took out this set, stroked the cold metal with her fingers, and said, "When I get married, Mama, we'll eat cake with these on our anniversary." This was her dowry, a dowry she hadn't even bothered to take with her while leaving to burn through my money. Mr. Sterling put on white cotton gloves, took a loop from his pocket, and leaned over the table. Silence hung in the room, broken only by his breathing and the soft clink of metal as he carefully turned a spoon. "Gorham Chantilly pattern," he murmured more to himself than to me. "Early production. The condition is marvelous. These have hardly been used." "Never," I corrected. "They were admired." He straightened up, took off his glasses, and looked at me with new interest. "A rare and expensive item. Usually, in these cases, they offer the scrap price, but that would be sacrilege. I can offer you—" He named a sum. The sum was impressive. It equaled 5 of my monthly checks. A month ago, I would have fainted from happiness. I would have grabbed that money and hidden it under the mattress for a rainy day. But today, something different woke up inside me. Years spent at fabric markets, where I haggled for every inch of silk for my clients to save them a dime, suddenly made themselves known. "No," I said firmly. Alistair blinked. "Excuse me?" "This is Gorham, early period," I repeated his words, looking him straight in the eye. "A full set in the original case without a single scratch. You will sell these to a collector for 3 times what you offered me. I'm not asking for the market price, Mr. Sterling. I'm asking for a fair dealer's price." I named my figure. It was 40% higher than his offer. He chuckled. Wrinkles gathered at the corners of his eyes. "You, Mrs. Eulalie, are not as simple as you seem." "Life teaches you," I parried. "All right, we have a deal." He paused for another second, weighing whether to haggle, but apparently realized that before him stood not a desperate old lady, but a business partner. "Deal." 10 minutes later he left, taking the case with him, and I remained standing in the middle of the room, clutching a thick stack of bills in my hand. My heart was pounding somewhere in my throat. It wasn't fear. It was adrenaline, pure intoxicating energy. I had just sold Quintessa's dowry. I had sold a piece of family history, and I didn't feel a drop of guilt. I felt the weight that had pressed on my shoulders for years become just a little lighter. I didn't hide the money. I put it in my purse, put on my best coat, beige cashmere, kept for special occasions, and walked out of the house. My legs carried me on their own, but not to the usual discount supermarket with yellow price tags and wilted cabbage. I was walking downtown, to the Epicurean market. I hadn't been there in 15 years. The prices there bit so hard, it was scary to even look at the windows. But today, I wasn't planning to look. The heavy doors swung open before me, and I was washed over by the smell of fresh baking, coffee, and expensive spices. I walked past the shelves like a queen returning from exile. I didn't look at potatoes. I didn't look for discounts on pasta. I went to the deli counter. "Weigh me out 1/2 pound of prosciutto di Parma, please," I told the clerk, "and some of that Virginia ham." Then came the cheese section. I took a wedge of aged Parmesan and a soft brie with truffles. I grabbed a jar of almonds stuffed olives. I bought a fresh baguette, still warm, crusty, and then I saw them. Peaches. Huge, velvety, filled with sunshine, lying on a woven tray. Out of season, of course, imported. They cost as much as an airplane wing. 2, I said, the most beautiful ones. And finally, the seafood section. Cold smoked salmon, thin slices, translucent in the light, the color of sunset. I walked out of the market with 2 paper bags. They weren't heavy, but they held more life than all my stocks of grits over the last 10 years. At home, I didn't eat in the kitchen on the oilcloth tablecloth. I went into the living room. I took a snow-white tablecloth with handmade lace out of the sideboard. Quintessa forbade me to use it. "You'll stain it, Mama. That's for guests." "Today I am the guest," I said aloud to the empty room. I spread the tablecloth, took out the best plate from that very service. Thin porcelain with a gold rim. I laid out a silver fork. I still had forks. Knives and dessert spoons were also plentiful. I had only sold the teaspoons. I laid out my purchases. I rolled the slices of ham into rosettes, cut the cheese into cubes. Olives, salmon, warm bread that I broke with my hands, crumbling right onto the tablecloth, and the peach. I bit into it, and sweet juice splashed onto my lips. The taste was incredible. It wasn't just the taste of food, it was the taste of freedom. The taste of the fact that I exist, that I am important, that my body, my stomach, my desires matter. I ate slowly, savoring every bite, washing it all down with black tea from a ceremonial cup. I looked at the blank wall where the calendar hung and realized all these years I had been saving things for a future that might never come. I lived in expectation that someone would appreciate my sacrifice, but sacrifices aren't appreciated. They are used. When I finished, only crumbs remained on the plate. I felt a fullness I hadn't experienced in a very long time, a calm, dignified fullness. I stood up and walked to the sideboard. The place where the spoon case had stood gaped with emptiness. The dust there was slightly lighter, outlining a rectangle. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the long receipt from the gourmet market. I carefully smoothed it out and placed it right in the center of that light rectangle, in place of the family silver. On the receipt, amidst the list of delicacies, the word "total" was printed in large letters. I smiled at my reflection in the glass of the sideboard. "Dinner," I whispered. "It was just dinner." The week flew by like one long sunny day. I woke up not to an alarm clock to run to the cheap store for discounts, but when the sun touched my pillow. I had croissants with butter for breakfast, not empty oatmeal. And so, as I sat in the armchair with a glass of rich red wine, a Cabernet from 2015, advised by the sommelier at the wine boutique, the phone rang. The ring was harsh, demanding. I knew who it was without even picking up. Only Quintessa knew how to call, as if the telephone should apologize for not ringing sooner. "Hello!" I brought the receiver to my ear, not setting down my glass. "Mama!" My daughter's voice burst into my silence. In the background, the ocean roared, seagulls screamed, and some rhythmic music played. "How are you doing there? Still alive?" There was so much feigned concern in her voice, mixed with blatant superiority, that the wine seemed sour for a moment. "Alive, Quintessa, quite." "I was thinking," she spoke loudly, shouting over the surf. "You're probably bored there alone and hungry. You boil that grits, but add more water. It's more filling that way. Old Grandma's recipe, remember?" I took a sip of wine. The velvety taste returned, washing away the bitterness of her words. "I'm managing," I answered calmly. "Don't worry." "Oh, come on, don't put on a brave face," she chuckled. "I know you've got nothing to eat there, but it's okay. Hold on for another week. By the way, I saw a fridge magnet for you shaped like a dolphin. If, of course, you don't run up the electric bill while I'm gone. Because I know you'll forget to turn off the light in the bathroom, and I'll have to pay for it later." She spoke to me like an unreasonable child, like a burden that needed to be controlled even from 1,000 miles away. Before, I would have started making excuses. I would have said, No, baby, I'm saving. I don't even turn on the TV." But now, I just smiled at my reflection in the dark window. "I'm finding resources Quintessa didn't even suspect existed," I uttered, looking at the wine bottle on the table. "So don't worry about the lights." "Resources?" She laughed again, and there was so much smugness in that laugh. "What are you talking about? Found some change in the sofa, or went to Miss Theodosia for salt? Look, don't embarrass me in front of the neighbors. Don't go around with your hand out." "All right, I gotta go." We have a pool party. Don't get bored there with your porridge." Click. She hung up, confident in her complete, undivided power over me. In her picture of the world, I was sitting right now in a dark kitchen, choking on plain porridge, counting the days until her return so I could gratefully accept a magnet and a new portion of reproaches. She thought she had broken me, that the hunger training was successful. I finished the wine, feeling the warmth spread through my body. "Pool party," I repeated, placing the empty glass on the table. "Well, I have my own plans too." I picked up the notebook lying next to the phone. On the open page, a time was already written down. Tomorrow, 11 o'clock sharp. Alistair S. I had planned to sell the wardrobe, that huge oak closet in the hallway that took up half the passage and always snagged my sleeves with its carved corners. It was antique, expensive, but I hated it. It was a dark spot that absorbed light. But after the conversation with Quintessa, I changed my mind. The wardrobe, that's too much hassle. Movers, noise, dust. I wanted something elegant, something that would hit her just as painfully as her words about watering down the grits. I got up and went to the dresser in the bedroom. There, in the top drawer, lay another jewelry box. Smaller. I opened it. On a velvet cushion lay a brooch, an antique gold piece in the shape of a twig with leaves, studded with small diamonds, and a large dark ruby in the center. This ruby burned like a drop of thick blood. Quintessa adored this brooch. She never asked for permission, just took it when she went on a date or an office party. "Mama, it's vintage. It's all the rage right now," she would say, pinning the brooch to the lapel of her blazer. She considered this thing hers, just like the apartment, just like me. I took the brooch in my hands. The stone was cold, but quickly warmed up in my palm. I remembered how Quintessa once lost the clasp from it and didn't even apologize. "Well, fix it. You're a seamstress," she tossed out then. And I fixed it. Tomorrow, Mr. Sterling would come to appraise the wardrobe, but he wouldn't leave with it. In the morning, the antique dealer was precise as always. "Good morning, Mrs. Eulalie." He smiled, tipping his hat. "Ready to part with the giant in the hallway?" I shook my head, inviting him in. "I changed my mind about the wardrobe, Alistair. Changed my mind for now. Too much fuss. But I have something else, something more personal." I held out the brooch to him. Mr. Sterling's eyes lit up with professional excitement. He carefully took the piece, held it up to the light, and put on his inevitable loupe. "Oh," he exhaled. "Late 19th century? St. Petersburg work, perhaps?" "No, likely New Orleans Creole craftsmanship. The ruby is natural, unheated, very deep color, and old mine cut diamonds. This is a piece with character." "How much?" I asked. He named a price. It was twice as high as for the spoons. It was money one could live on comfortably for 6 months, or treat oneself to 2 weeks of paradise. "It's yours," I said. Not bargaining this time. The price was fair, and my desire to get rid of this thing was burning. When Alistair counted out the bills, I looked at the brooch one last time. It lay on the table, sparkling in a sunbeam. Beautiful, predatory, alien. "You know," Alistair said, putting the brooch into a special pouch, "this item surely has a history." "It does," I nodded, taking the money. "But the history has ended. Now it's just stone and metal." He left, and I was alone again. I looked at the spot in the jewelry